Okay, so this is the third video in a series on portable, low-cost solar generator options. In this little 4-video series, I'm basing most of it on these little 12-volt power packs from Harbor Freight, solar land charge controller, although there's a lot of other 10-amp charge controllers on the market that do about the same thing. What was unique about this one, and one of the reasons I decided to go with a project on this, apart from the fact that I already had them on hand, is that it allowed me to connect a little bit thicker wires on this than some of the lower grade charge controllers. So I'm using the thickest grade wires that I could get into these things. Again, I hook things up as directly as possible, avoiding the use of crimp connectors that give me a little bit of power loss. We're trying to scavenge every little bit of power out of these things as possible, and where on automotive, RV, and home applications, you don't really care about fractions of an amp loss or something in a connection. In solar applications, where you have that poverty of power that I've talked about a lot, you want to make sure you're getting every little bit. One of the other ways you get every little bit out of it is, if it's possible to solder a connection, do solder a connection, and in theory that'll make the connections last longer. And on the application I ran into when I did the demonstration video where I was out in the desert, I was using power tools, both Ryobi and DeWalt, okay? And my rationale for that is, again, there's some power tools like that little circular saw. DeWalt makes better tools, but DeWalt does not make a cordless chop saw, okay? DeWalt does not make a cordless planer, okay? They do not make a cordless planer. When I need something with more power, let's say on an impact, for driving lag screws, okay, I have this DeWalt impact wrench. This thing's got power. I can bust lug nuts on both my trucks with that rig. The big truck, it's got a little bit of an issue, but the little Japanese stuff, I got a little 80-something Japanese rig. It's just fine for that. Ryobi makes the far superior 12-volt charger over the DeWalt. One of the big problems on a DeWalt 12-volt charger is this plug. It doesn't give a good connection. I was having problems getting my batteries charged because this little spring-loaded thing wasn't working right. Or if it's just pushed on, if for whatever reason this pulls out just a little bit, I lose my connection altogether. So, and that is endemic to cigarette lighter style plugs on electronic devices. These types of plugs were originally made for car cigarette lighters, I believe in the 1930s, and by default they ended up being used with a lot of electronic devices that run 12 volt. But the reason for that size and shape was so that somebody could have a little spring-loaded device. You'd push the lighter into the electrical outlet, it would heat up a little element, and then it would pop out as soon as it heated up, a little spring thing. And so they were never made to power anything long term, and that's just one of the problems you run into when you use a cigarette lighter plug style outlet for 12-volt items. So there's no law against doing it with 110 3-prong outlet items. You just got to make sure you get your polarity right. So on most automotive applications and electronic applications, like on these batteries here, red is positive, black is negative. On household 110 applications, black is positive, white is negative. So what I'm doing here is I matched my polarity on my cord. I did a little, use a multimeter, did a continuity check, figured out which of these two wires here corresponded to the positive, which is the center post on a 12-volt item, and a negative, which is the outside connector on a 12-volt item. On DC items, 99.9% of the time, the center connector is your positive, okay? A little continuity check, figured out which of these two wires was the right one, spliced them one at a time into a conventional plug. This conventional plug Again, we got the polarity right, and set this up so that I can plug 12 volt items into this plug by disassembling the stock bone, incorporating it into the charge controller, and then now this thing's working fine. Okay, I can charge the DeWalt batteries off of this battery. Now it may seem a little weird, why wouldn't I just use the inverter to run stuff? Well, a lot of these tools are made battery only, and by running everything battery only, I can switch back and forth between whether I was using a 110 charger or 12 volt charger. Now, changing the wiring on this does not turn this into a 110 charger. This is a 12 volt charger. It's not specially labeled. I'm going to be spray painting it so that I can tell beyond a shadow of a doubt that it's a 12 volt charger. And when I convert items over to run on what I call plug-in 12 volt off-grid, that's the big thing, is making sure that that polarity stays straight. But you get all of the advantages of a plug style. Again, if you use you've used 2-prong plugs, it's possible to get these things backwards. If you use a 3-prong plug, your polarity always stays consistent. Okay, so I don't use a 3rd prong. You could use this as negative. I don't. I use the this one right here becomes a positive. This one becomes a negative. You can't stick these things in upside down. It's not going to work. But again, you got to make sure you're using things that don't have this plug knocked off. And as far as getting this end of a power cord, you know, old appliances, old power tools, there's stuff all over dumps and junkyards that's going to get you the types of plugs you need. The thing about this is, even if it's still a little jostled out or pulled out just a little bit or something like that, you still get a connection all along the shaft of each one of these prongs. Whereas on the conventional 12 volt plugs, if this thing separates a little bit, you lose your connection. A lot of these are spring loaded, but the spring will just push it right back out of the plug. And then you end up with a real dicey connection. And that is the root of the problem on a lot of 12 volt stuff. It's the root of a lot of reliability issues. Now, these power boxes, they have a little 400 watt inverter built onto them. Okay. The other thing a person can do, if you're going to go totally homemade, use a car battery, maybe hardwire this onto the side of a car battery. There's guys that build them into toolboxes. Is you can get other, you know, portable inverters like this one, and then do the same thing. Hardwire it or change this out. But watch out, because some of these are fused. Okay, a lot of these have a fuse built into the handle, and by changing out that plug, you lose that fuse. Well, that's not too hard of a problem to solve. You got most of your electronic places are going to have something like this. It's a little fuse holder. Usually these things max out at about 10 or 15 amps. But again, 10-15 amps is what you're dealing with on these microgrid situations. But you could hook one of those into your line, usually on the positive side. Every once in a while, I will fuse a negative side if I know it's a closed system. The other thing is, some people like to play around with 24 volt stuff. Now that's two normal 12 volt panels hooked up in series, or 24 volt panel. There is such a thing, and you need to step that voltage down. Well, this little device here allows you to basically take your voltage and chop it in half. So you got an input and output. It'll chop your voltage in half, and that's how this thing works. The thing I don't like about these, it's got positive, negative. Nothing in the instruction explain what that yellow wire is. I don't know if it's a switching wire for this thing or what. But this device is, I get these on eBay. A lot of people get them on eBay. It's a 10 amp device. It would work with something on this scale. And you'll see that kind of a thing if you're trying to make your own power box out of a uninterruptible power supply box that you can get like at a computer store. Although normally nobody's going to want to cut up a brand new one to make a solar power unit out of it. So a lot of times you get a used one. And you can use those as a basis for a homemade solar generator off-grid unit. And they're usually available pretty cheap because people find out that the proprietary batteries they usually take cost so much, you might as well just go get a new one. The thing is, you can drill holes in the bottoms of those things, hook up car batteries or whatever. You don't have to use those proprietary batteries as long as you put the thing in some kind of a housing and run wires outside of the unit. The reason most of those take a proprietary battery is the size and shape of the unit, not the voltage or amperage that those batteries really need to use, as long as your system voltage remains consistent. But yeah, so this is a third part of the series. I wanted to show that when you got problems with these plugs, these cigarette lighter plugs, which are again, they were invented for cigarette lighters and cars in the 30s. Not really the best plug system for electronic devices because they can push themselves out of contact with the contacts at the bottom of the plug. And you want to shift everything over to something with a more reliable system. These have been in use for what, 100 years now. It's just a matter of checking your polarity, making sure you're consistent when you build your system, and it's going to work. I was having problems with this out in the desert, and we really had some issues with making sure that the DeWalt equipment was up and running because we needed it. We needed the stronger equipment, and the Ryobi stuff out that Ryobi charger was always working. It's just, you know, their tools aren't always as strong as they should be, but you get what you pay for, and their batteries are excellent. These lights did really well out in the desert. That spotlight is amazing, and I don't know how to do a review on it. I mean, in the daytime it just doesn't do it justice. At night, that spotlight is absolutely amazing. The little lanterns, it's a get what you pay for situation. They're a $24 lantern. You know, if your batteries are charged up and it gets dark, you put these things around your camp or your cabin or whatever. They get it done, and they're going to last all night. And so by the next morning, you got enough juice left in some of your batteries to get back to work, and then you circulate your batteries through the charger and go back to work, and everything's fine. So I personally probably will retrofit the plug on this, but again, you gotta label it very carefully. There is a secret code to these things, or basically if it's a black top, it's a vehicle charger. If it's a green top, it's the house charger. But switching your stuff over to this type of plug, even though it's 12 volt, smart thing to do.